What's up, startup founders? If you are raising funds from angel investors, you're going to want to stay tuned here. We're going to be talking about raising funds from an angel group instead of individual angels. We're going to do a fireside chat with Richard Pivnicka, who's had a long and storied career as a general counsel in the real estate sector. He's also honorary general counsel for the Czech Republic. Most importantly for this topic, he's on the deal screening committee of Band of Angels, one of the most prominent angel investment groups in the Silicon Valley. So we're going to talk about how to engage Band of Angels, what happens behind the scenes when you submit a pitch proposal, and then what hot buttons to look out for. And a sneak preview, most founders will probably be surprised at a few things Richard has to say about pitching angel investors. So let's dive right in. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sam Wong, and we are here today with Richard Pivnicka from Band of Angels. We're going to have our Meet an Angel Investor series, and we'll have a lively conversation, I'm sure, with Richard. What we can go ahead and do is start. Richard, can you maybe introduce yourself to us here?
Yes. To put me in context, I'm active at the Band of Angels. We're at the deal screening committee. It's a 6-member committee that does the final analysis before it goes to membership to determine if everyone wishes to invest. But my background, I'm an accountant, lawyer, finance, MBA. So I look at deals from the point of view of, does it make money? Where most of my other colleagues at the band, there's 165 other members, are usually techies and look at things in depth from the tech point of view. And I look at things from will it make money point of view. So it's a good marriage.
Got it. Very good. And I'm going to kind of share a little bit because I've known Richard a little while here. Richard does a lot of things. Okay. Not only does he have a finance and accounting background, and has has served as a lawyer, works in real estate. You've also been in the military, and in your work right now, you wear a lot of hats. One of the hats that you have is your honorary counsel for the Czech Republic, representing here in California. That's a lot of responsibility. With the Band of Angels, you mentioned that you serve on the deal committee. As I understand it, that committee is basically a gatekeeper committee. So what I would call to everyone's attention here is make sure you listen carefully to what Richard has to say. That gatekeeper committee is very important.
You're too kind. You're the expert. That's why I'm here, because you're the expert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the goals here is to definitely help people to understand how to pitch to an organization like Band of Angels and to angel investors in general. One of the challenges that the most startup founders have is, getting investors. And the typical ask that I get from lots of founders is introduce me, introduce me, introduce me. And then maybe an introduction is made, but then what? Sometimes founders, if they don't understand what's important to an investor, what's important to specifically an angel investor, what's important to an angel group, they can oftentimes miss the mark. Okay. So hopefully this time people are taking good notes, and they can get some good insight on what would be important to a group like Band of Angels. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about Band of Angels itself? You mentioned already 165 people, maybe how long it's been around,
Yes.
How you guys are organized, etc.
Yes. The band has been around about 28 years. It's by invitation only, has about 17 IPOs and under 100 exits, probably many more than 100, depending on how you define exit. It's funny, when you should always use the word successful exit as opposed to the word exit. There's a little nuance there. There's 10 committees at the band. As you would expect, hard tech, software, energy. There's also accelerator committee where we collaborate, as well as a VC committee. And the VC committee is around specifically to save our bacon, because after we invest in seed money, we find that startups running around, frankly, just looking for any money when they need to look at the specific VC who would be interested in their subject matter, because they're all interested in what you have to say, but that doesn't mean they're interested in investing
Right.
in your startup. So we try to bridge that gap and narrow it and make that introduction and hand off the ball from our seed funded startup to an A round VC.
Great, great. That sounds like it can be very, very important because, as you mentioned, a VC, the VC community tends to be very friendly. If
Yes.
you connect with them, they tend to be, they'll tell you positive things about your startup, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to invest. A lot of the VCs have to stay active in information gathering, and your appointment with a VC may be fulfilling one main purpose of teaching the VC, but it may not be filling your purpose of getting closer to an investment. Okay. So it sounds like that committee can be really effective in helping you to focus your time on the right VCs. All right. So in terms of the organization, 165 members by invitation only. Obviously, every member is different, but if you had to kind of do some broad brushstrokes, how would you describe the typical background of a member in the Band of Angels?
Okay, fair enough. I would say majority are senior members of senior management at legacy companies, maybe 15 years ago, and they'd done extremely well and invested in startups and other companies. And then so there's silver hair, no hair, or gray hair. And they really have great depth of experience, which is frankly part of the fun aspect of being a member of the band, because there's a social aspect to it that many angel groups don't have. And then there's another contingent of a younger group, women, younger people who have had several startups, maybe 3, 4, or 5 startups under the belt. 1 or 2 went well, so they have a wealth of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the general overview of the membership. It would be nice to have a coterie of very young members, because we have a tendency to miss the social media aspect, because
Okay.
we don't use social media in general terms compared to someone who's 20 something years old.
Right, right. We had a conversation in our family recently about Facebook, and then my kids are like, "That's for old people." None of the youth really use Facebook that much. Okay, I understand. So, in terms of the structure, you've got this people who are successful in business. They've built themselves a comfortable life, and now they have opportunities to be able to invest, and so they participate. Tell me about how does somebody apply? Let's say I'm a founder. How do they get on Band of Angels' radar? How do they apply? What's the process like?
Yes, the band has a website for applications, but I would draw everyone's attention to the one pager, because that one pager is the format is on the band website. It's the best possible thing for an investor to read, because I can tell in 1 minute of reading that all the issues, all the major issues, and what I want to know, because the deck, frankly, rarely has all the elements in it that an investor wants to know.
Okay.
And so it's a very good template, in my view, that ticks off the most important topics. And I send that to everybody because that's very helpful. So it goes through a funnel, through a general review, then a committee review, then by the way, one of the ones that I read first before the one pager even is if it has a video, and if it has a good video, because it's easier than reading, right? And it's usually, if it's well done, you can tell they're sophisticated.
Okay.
So it goes through the funnel of a general review, then a specialized committee review, then the deal screening review, and then it goes to a meeting of the membership. We see the last 6 deals. We get 50 to 70 deals a month from all over the world. And we narrow it down to 6. And we recommend usually 3 to the band membership dinner, cocktails and dinner. They're now hybrid. They used to be all in person. And then we select 1 or perhaps 2 to go into due diligence to be funded.
Got it. Okay. So if I'll go ahead and share the actual website for people who are with us online. So bandangels.com is the website. We're seeing it here. And if you go to the website, you can go to the apply to present in the upper right of the nav bar. As Richard had mentioned, there is a 1-page template overview, which basically Richard's counseling you. Pay attention to the template. Okay. Make sure whatever you submit checks off everything that the template says to do. Okay. All right. And then should you choose to apply and you make it through the process, 50 to 70 submissions per month. There's a general review, a specialty committee. So if you're doing hardware, your application will probably go to the hardware special interest group, that part of the Band of Angels team. And then if that specialty group says thumbs up, then it goes to your group, the deal screening committee. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
and usually in that process from that committee, these people have knowledge of the subject matter. So they're sophisticated. So they're way beyond the average investor looking at a deal. And usually someone bubbles up from that team to be the lead or the sponsor for the deal.
Okay.
And they're the champion that the startup should get to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that startup makes it through that process and there is in essence, a deal lead, a champion at Band of Angels, how does that deal lead connect with the startup or the startup connect with the deal lead?
Yes. Well, the committee will review the deals online virtually. So during that pitch, there's usually a connection that takes place between someone on the committee and the CEO that's doing the presentation.
Okay, got it. All right. So definitely build a good relationship with that deal lead. You'll have an opportunity to meet that person. And if let's say you happen to be the deal lead for one of these deals, what would be something that you look for in a startup?
Okay. I'm not speaking for the band because I may look at things different.
Okay.
Everyone has different criteria. I look for the team. I appreciate an experienced team that has had a success or 2 and actual failures. That's a value added to me. If the startup is a brilliant young people from MIT and Stanford, that's nice, but I would encourage them to get people on board on the operating team, not just an advisor for their credential, but that they can save a lot of time by bringing experience onto the team, in my personal view. Then the second aspect, I look for a mega market. It jumps out at you. It's just gigantic. And the third would probably be, a product that is or service that's a must-have, not something it's marginally better. And anything that saves money, by the way, is hard to sell, even though it's very good. You got to sell it to an accounting consulting firm if it's saving money. That's a whole different, and it can be very good, but it's harder to sell saving money.
Right.
So those are my 3 personal criteria. Okay. And then the last most important one is something that I understand. That always helps, because you hear and see things that are extraordinary, but if you don't understand them, there's a long learning curve. So that's a plus.
Right. Okay. It's kind of funny. You and I have both been on demo days as a pitch judge and things like that. It's amazing, isn't it, how many founders struggle to communicate clearly what their startup does.
Yes, it's shocking that they don't have it down to that. They have to pitch it to someone that's a senior in high school, and that senior in high school should understand it clear as a bell. They get in the weeds and they get into the technology way too early. When you're speaking to an investor, they got to communicate very early on, how is the investor going to make money? Not tell me how whiz bang the technology is, but how is the investor to get my attention and the other angel investors' attention.
Yeah. So Richard's here talking about something very, very important that we see lots of untrained founders, make a mistake on, and that's not knowing your audience and what their hot buttons are. Most founders start their startup because they love what they're doing. They want to solve a problem and they fall in love with the product. So oftentimes, most times you're pitching the product. But when you talk to an investor, you need to talk about the business.
Yes, that's really, really important. And almost all pitches are all leaning toward the technology and now not how it's monetized. It's really that's a really enormous factor on the learning curve. There's also another aspect. The startup should assume that the people he's pitching to may not know anything about the subject matter industry. So my favorite slide in a deck, beside the team slide, is a competitive landscape matrix slide. That is, name all the companies that are competitors and all the aspects, including pricing, that no one ever has. So when I get to that slide, I can tell in a nanosecond if they're best of breed. Because I will not know about the industry, and I need to be educated, very, very quickly. And the startup doesn't know everyone's background. So that's the best way to educate people with angels and other investors with diverse backgrounds, because later on, I will study that chart. And if anything's missing from that chart, such as another real competitor, they lose credibility. That means they're not on top of the industry that they are breaking into.
Got it. So context in the industry, knowledge, and communicating that very effectively. Maybe a slightly different question here. When the band of angels decides to make an investment, how is that investment usually structured? What's the perspective of
we strongly prefer a convertible note. When a safe notes come up, we negotiate an addendum so they walk and talk closer to a convertible note.
Okay. And can you help us understand why that's the case? What's so special about a convertible note?
Safe notes, the startup has to realize the content and all the fine points of both kinds of notes, but they have to put themselves in an investor's point of view. Do they want to invest? You should ask them. Do they want to invest in a note that has no due date? So you can't call up and say, it's due. That is just a one point in the safe note that's disadvantageous to a investor, and it's a turnoff.
Right. And you mentioned one thing that's very, very key that I would really want to highlight to the participants here. Put yourself in the investor's shoes. I'm amazed how few founders really do that and do that well, because I don't invest very often, but when I do, I have invested. I prefer a convertible note myself because I like the forcing function of the loan's maturity date to keep the founders kind of hustling, that they have to constantly make progress, et cetera. Besides the fact that there's one little corner case situation, which again, founders, you need to understand that get an investor to invest in a safe, but let's say your startup is amazingly successful and you never raise a round of preferred stock because your company is, making money right away. Well, the investor who invested in the safe, they have no recourse to get their money back. All right. So that they're not a stockholder because the safe never converted to stock. So they have very little influence on your company. Actually, if you decide to switch gears and turn it into a lifestyle business that is you're not going to exit until you're ready to retire, then the investor's money is locked up and they can't get a return.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I would like to actually add a couple of points that the startups are not really fully aware of. At least at the band, I can say without a doubt, the investors at the band want to help the startup. And what I find is after the startup is funded, they don't ask for help. It's just radio silence. And we're more than eager to help. All the investors that I know of at the band, once they put the money in, they want to help move that forward, that startup forward. For example, I encourage a newsletter, a blast, short, to the point, periodic, every 6 weeks, that the startup should shoot the investors and friends of the startup to let us know what's going on, so we continue to think about them. And then that newsletter, or blast, I'll call it, should end with an ask. We need help getting XYZ. And this, I have found, those startups that use it have really gotten further than those that haven't, because once again, it's frustrating from an investor point of view. You put in the money and you don't hear anything for months and later until they need more money.
It sounds like a teenage kid.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So maybe we've got a lot of questions coming in on the chat. One final question before we open it up to the Q&A in the chat. Is there anything about a startup pitch that would turn you off?
Yes. I'm going to IPO in 5 years. It's the end of the conversation.
Really? Why would you say that?
If you do a study on how long it takes to IPO, you don't do it in 5 years. And if you're pitching to people with silver hair, gray hair, no hair, they don't want to hear 10 years, which is a kind of a round number for an IPO. That's not realistic thinking. And many investors want a reasonable exit. The band likes to hear 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. If it gets to 8 to 10 years, they probably won't garner an investment, and especially if it's over $10 million valuation.
Got it. It's very interesting because this is another data point that many founders don't understand, is what are the keys that the investor's looking for. It may sound like we're going to IPO, we're going to be the next Facebook, we're going to be whatever. And that sounds interesting, but it's what Richard's saying here is that actually is a turnoff. Because number one, most companies don't IPO. Number two, the time frame to IPO is too long. And number three, I'm going to say this, I don't think Richard's in it. Those types of claims come across as empty bluster. Okay. It's almost like you're bragging about something that you haven't demonstrated any traction, momentum to say you can actually do that. Okay. So to me, the empty claims is a very big turnoff, and I'll probably write about that at some point on my blog, etc. But thank you very much, Richard. We're getting near the bottom of the hour. We want to open it up here to people. And by the way, Richard, you have a startup too, right?
Yes, I have the disease that a lot of my colleagues have. I have a company called Hear You Now, and it has an audio device that's called Table Talk. It's an audio device that sits in the middle of a table that helps you talk and hear each other in a noisy environment among, say, 4 to 10 people. For example, in a noisy restaurant or a conference center, you can't talk to everyone at your table. And it's very frustrating, especially if you want to pitch something. And I have a patented prototype that is looking for a partner to go to the next step of commercialization.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. So let's start taking a couple of questions from the chat. There's one question, a very recent one from Paul. Can we put, assuming that in an application to Band of Angels, can we put that we got referred by Richard Pivnicka?
Certainly. Now that might cut 2 ways. Yeah. No. If in fact, sure, why not?
Yeah. So this shows the difference between Richard and myself, because Richard's a really nice guy. I'm a lot meaner, I guess. My answer to that would probably be no, unless I really know something about you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will come out, frankly, later. They'll be quizzed on that right away. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds good. Let's see if there are other questions. There's one from Ryan. How likely is a pre-revenue startup with customers doing trials to get funded by the band?
It's done with some regularity, depending on like maybe a medical device that's can be acquired within 3 or 4 years. They have no revenue, but the clinical trials or all the tests look positive. Mm-hmm. In that context, that can fly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. I believe I saw a question earlier about what is an example of a product that is a must-have, not a nice-to-have. And I can kind of comment on this because we actually, with our startup number 3 that I was at, was a financial services compliance software product, mortgage compliance for predatory loans, predatory terms on loans. And the reason that company product was a must-have was all sorts of jurisdictions across the US, from state, federal, as well as some local jurisdictions, were enacting predatory loan terms, laws, but there was no way to know whether you comply. So we built an engine that would ingest the terms of the loan and say, well, you're in Berkeley, California. Berkeley has a special rule. You are not in compliance. So our tool would say green light or red light on the compliance. Then there was no other tool to be able to tell you whether you are in compliance or not. And with all the loans that are written across all the mortgages across the US, we had tens of thousands of loans that needed to be compliance checked every single month. So a regulatory requirement would be an example. Maybe another example is if you have the only small insulin pump, okay, and maybe the other insulin pumps are too large. Well, if you don't use an insulin pump, then your health will go to. Sorry, just had to meet somebody there. So those would be a couple examples of products that would be pretty much a need and not a need to have, not a nice to have. Okay. So Ivan's got a good question. How does one pitch without going too deep into medical background or terminology?
That's an excellent question. This is a matter, again, of educating. You have to find out who you're pitching to. That's not so easy. You try to find that out in advance. And then you stay away from all of your abbreviations. And the first time you use the technology, you should spell it out. Don't assume the person you're speaking to, even though they're an MD, that they know about this aspect of medicine or the medical device. It's frustrating many times to hear a pitch and you lose what the subject matter is because of all the abbreviations and the shortcomings. Because the startup, understandably, is deep in the weeds, and they've been working on it for years. But the person who's listening very well may not have any idea what they're talking about unless it's clear as a bell. Make it just clear. You're speaking to a high school senior. Make sure they understand it. That's how to, in my view, the way to look at it.
Right, right. So if I would paraphrase, I think what Richard's saying is that understand your audience. If you're talking to life sciences specialty people, then you can probably get a little bit more technical and make some assumptions and not spell out the details of FDA, approval process, because they probably know it. But if you're talking to a generalist audience, make sure you understand who they are so that you don't lose them. At some point, if you are a life sciences type of company and there's a lot of tech involved or a lot of science involved, you will be talking to probably somebody who is a specialty, maybe a PhD in the field, just for the technical due diligence. At that point, have at it. Go ahead and geek out on all the technical science stuff. But for the general population, just make sure who you're speaking with.
Okay. Yes, and when questions are posed, there should be short answers, because the idea is to get as many investors' questions answered to include them in the conversation, not this long, tedious answer to nail it. The question, a few sentences to answer the inquiry suffices, not to establish all the information you know about the topic. That happens all the time. Because if you talk to 10 investors, answer 10 investors' questions, as opposed to 5, you have a higher likelihood you'll have more angel investors interested. Got
it. Absolutely good. We would love to continue with a lot of the questions, but we are out of time. I do apologize to everybody here. So Richard, thank you very much for sharing. Is there a closing, anything that you'd like to share?
Sure. I would encourage everyone that thinks they would like to submit an application to the band. We see neat things from all over the world, and we try to help move it forward, even by recommendation, many times, even if we don't invest. So I would encourage anyone with a solid startup to apply to the band.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
So we posted the web address in the chat. We also shared the website. You can find it on your own after the meeting. Just from my side, just to wrap things up, maybe I can kind of share a little bit more about Fundable Startups and what we do. We have a number of training offers. We have segmented into an academy and a self-paced video-based training. And basically in the academy, it's live instruction, 12 weeks divided into 2 6-week sections. Self-paced, of course, is video on demand. The academy covers a fixed amount of content for, basically 24 hours, whereas the self-paced, our premium package, you get all current and future training, which is at this point 35 hours and more. Coaching is built into the academy, whereas it's an optional add-on on the self-paced. And then there's the details about the cost. If you're interested, we have an academy coming up scheduled for the January timeframe with a discount code there. So thank you very much for joining us. We will leave this up briefly if you want to scan either the QR codes to learn about our training offers, and I will go ahead and paste into the chat the shortened links for your reference. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we will post this up on YouTube, the replay up on YouTube in about a week's time. Okay.
Thank you for the invitation and the first-rate questions.
All right. Good luck, everybody, with your startups. We'll wrap it now. Thank you.